Today is December 5th. I am on the road. Hopefully my internet is strong enough to stay through the class, but we'll meditate, and then Victoria's going to continue her discussion on the 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva by Golchu Dogme. Let us set our intentions and aspirations by saying the four immeasurables. And before we say it, keep in mind, you're not saying it as if all beings are separate from you and apart from you. You're saying it from within the center of the unity of all beings, of which we all are an inextricable part. May all beings have happiness in the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering in the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So that's basically how it'll go today. Why don't we just jump right in? I'm just going to show you something. This is not to believe. This is just I don't usually show these things, but I think it's kind of good because traveling often can throw off your equilibrium and your practice. And I'm someone who's traveled a lot. So what helps is, I'm going to show you what I do here. All right. So in hotel, I carry around these little, hopefully you can see that. So little photographs, that's Padmasambhava, my teacher Garchen Rinpoche in the middle, and Tara make little offerings. So it's like a portable shrine stuff that I like to bring, because I find that to be really centering, when you travel, because often practice is the first thing to go, when you get busy and you travel and you're thrown off your routine and things like that. But having that in a hotel, or a place you're renting, or a strange place, or even if you're traveling to family, having that in your space can be a good grounding reminder of practice. And then you put a cushion in front of it and meditate in the morning, like you do at home. So just something we've learned from trial and error. Okay, let's meditate. Let's meditate for 11 minutes. So you're sitting in the posture, whether it's cross-legged, legs folded on the cushion. Hopefully your hips are even or slightly higher than your knees. Back straight but not rigid. Hands, I like this, palm to the back of the hand folded in the lap. That could be on the knees. Just, it's basically your head is slightly tilted forward. Lips can be slightly apart or closed. Just relax your jaw, not slack. Usually I close my lips, but the teeth are kind of a little bit apart. We're breathing through the nose unless you can't. And we're taking a relaxed breath, not a really deep breath, not a shallow breath. Tibetan Buddhist tradition, eyes are open, which I assume is because, we're training the practice is training for life, really, and the awareness that's cultivated through meditation is something that you want to take into your daily life, which most of the time you're going to be having your eyes open. So it's good practice. The gaze, you can rest your gaze on anything that's in front of you. If it's a photograph or a thangka that's inspiring, or a flower or a view or just a wall, but you're not intensely locked in with the gaze and you're not spacing out of focus, just resting your gaze on whatever's in front of you. Let me just set this timer. Why is this Give me trouble today. Oh, okay. And just before you start, just relax. Just settle everything, body and mind, into the posture and into the intention of calming down, getting into the moment, let it dropping, the busyness of the mind and what's going on the rest of the day. And let's take that into 11 minutes of meditation. Let's stop one second. I always forget this very often. Let's do the 9 purifying breaths because that's always a really good. Victoria, would you like to lead us in the 9 purifying breaths?
No, you do it. You've been doing it so well. Just remember that
Okay.
we should visualize our body as empty when we're doing it, as an empty vessel.
Continue, please. Go ahead.
So we will purify the 3 channels left. The 3 channels are the white and the red and the central blue. The white is we are purifying when we exhale from the white through the white channel. We purify the negativity of poison. When we exhale through the red channel, we purify the negativity of attachment. And when we exhale through the blue channel for the last 3 breaths, we're exhaling ignorance. We are exhaling particularly dualism, delusion of holding impermanent, temporary, karmic things which arise and cease as permanent. That means release from samsara and dualistic conceptual thinking.
The white is, you said, negativity of anger, right?
Negativity of ignorance through the blue
No, the
channel.
white. White?
The white is anger.
Anger, yeah.
The red is attachment or desire, because desire is attachment. And the blue is ignorance. And in ignorance, particularly, we are purifying ourselves from the dualistic thinking and from holding phenomena as permanent. We are getting rid of these 2 obscurations. So we will start however you place the channels on your body, because for males and females, it's in reverse, the red and the white. It doesn't matter as long as you're purifying on the exhale the poison that is associated with the channel. Otherwise, it makes absolutely no difference where you start. As long as the red, you're purifying attachment, desire, attachment, and in the white, you're purifying hatred and aversion, and in the central blue channel, you're purifying the dualistic and the delusional mind. So
Great.
let's start. And on the last breath, I will guide you on the last breath. We will do what is called consciousness. Consciousness is released into space, and its consciousness becomes the awareness. Awareness like space arises, mixing consciousness with space. And last out breath, merging consciousness with space.
And take that right into the meditation, 11 minutes. Excellent. So I'm really grateful for Victoria to be here to teach about the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, because they're very important, because they're really about conduct, because we talk a lot in this class about the view. The view is taught by the Buddha, which is wisdom, which is the truth of interdependence, the truth of emptiness, meaning empty of inherent existence. Shunyata, what we've had classes about that, we've spoken about that here. Impermanence, non-duality, things like that. You have view, you have meditation, which is the practice where you take that and with that wisdom in mind, we prepare our minds, and we try to infuse that view into our minds through the practice of meditation, and letting that rapid chain and train of thought start to have gaps in it, start to clear that away, start to see how it works, start to see how our behavior moves at such speed with a lot of aggression. And aggression is not always angry and violent. Aggression can be about competitiveness, and aggression can also be subtle ways of us trying to get what we want all the time, thinking we're right all the time. One-upmanship, sometimes it can be. And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche said, and I read this quote recently, that compassion has to happen with a decrease in speed of our mind. So compassion has to come through presence, and the presence comes through settling that mind and being in the moment, and not always being 2 steps ahead of what's happening to meet our goals. Meeting our goals also, can be an element of aggression, and not necessarily always saying that that's a bad thing. Sometimes there are certain things you want to achieve in life, and there has to be certain planning, but it cannot be the dominant force in our life. That's not what we're trying to do. So we have our view, meditation, and basically it's like, what are we going to do with this? Because it cannot, the wisdom of the teachings of the Dharma cannot just stay as an intellectual exercise, and it cannot just stay when we're on our cushion. How do we bring these things into life is something we've talked about here a lot. What do we do? How do we, Padmasambhava Guru Rinpoche said something very important. We descend with the view, meaning the view is very vast. The view is about, our, ultimate truth, ultimate nature of reality, non-duality, complete and total interdependence, impermanence. Nothing is inherently solid. Nothing is inherently on its own, exists on its own, right? I'm completely dependent on so many factors: the sun, the oxygen, other people, so the view is very, very, that whole non-duality is gigantic. But we take that view into something as simple as going to the corner store and ordering a cup of coffee. How do we, as Buddhists, engage with the world in very simple moment-to-moment ways through the view? Padmasambhava says, descend with the view, but ascend with conduct. So from something very, very simple, like going to the store, engaging with the person in the store and buying a cup of coffee, something very simple, you ascend with that conduct to the view, almost, to that ultimate nature. Those things work together from 2 sides, So 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva is about the conduct of a bodhisattva, someone who's adopting the teachings of the Buddha, into and committing to living through that wisdom and through that action. So that's why this is so important, because this is, our roadmap and our guide to conduct. With that in mind, I'll turn this over to Victoria. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone. So we're continuing with the preliminaries of verses. We're going to do verses 4 through 7 today. Verse 4, long associated companions will part from each other. Wealth and possessions obtained with effort will be left behind. Consciousness, the guest, will cast aside the guest house of the body. Letting go of this life is the Bodhisattva's practice. This verse makes a clear distinction between our body and our mind, our consciousness, the guest and the guest house. So the consciousness is the guest and the body is the guest house. Our relative nature is our body, which expires as all composite relative phenomena do. And our consciousness that this is not of the same nature, something that's not this impermanent composite phenomena that expires and ends. Our consciousness, our mind, does not disperse like the body. It rather goes from one existence to the next. So when the guest leaves the guest house and goes to another lodging, what happens? So, the verse refers to all the long associated companions will part from each other. Wealth and possessions obtained with effort will be left behind. All the ordinary things of this life are like clouds, like a mirage, which arises for a time and vanishes like a dewdrop on a blade of grass when death comes. Everything we have pursued and dedicated the entirety of this existence, of this life, will vanish in an instant and must be left behind when death comes. We must be reminded of this so we can live properly now. And so that, as Michael said, our conduct can also reflect the view. If this body is not used for the purpose of following the path and subduing the poisons of negative emotions, which is the very cause that keeps us in samsara, when it's time for this body to finally expire, the expiration date is on the package of the meat, as all the composite phenomena do when the body dies. And Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche quotes this verse: whatever is born will die, whatever is gathered will disperse, whatever is accumulated will come to exhaustion, whatever is high will fall. That's the reminder. That's at the time of death what happens to the composite phenomena, to our body. Our ordinary mind is also a composite. This mind of I am this, I am that, my name is Victoria, I am a female who does this, my job is this, all these labels, that's our ordinary conceptual mind is a composite. So it's not made out of elements like our physical body, but it's made out of perceptions, memories, and all sorts of delusions. And especially, most importantly, the 5 poisons that keep us down here in samsara and perpetuate its cycle. So that composite, the conceptual mind, is to be distinguished from the nature of our mind, which is the sky-like nature, which does not arise and fall. It doesn't come together and disperse. The nature of our mind is the basis. It's something very, very completely different. So we have to distinguish the composite from the uncomposite, which doesn't arise momentarily and fall. At the time of death, what comes along with this unborn consciousness, with our nature of the mind, whether we call it mind or awareness or consciousness, it doesn't really matter. What comes with this consciousness when it is ready to depart from this body and leave this guest house and to move on to the next lodging? When this nature of the mind is ready to travel again, this consciousness which goes from one life to the next and leaves this particular life and this particular body, what comes with us? So the verse says the consciousness, the guest, leaves the guest house of the body. What goes are the poisons of non-virtue or merit and virtue, the habits, of virtuous mind and virtuous behavior. In other words, our karmic imprints. That's what goes with our consciousness from one lodging, from one body to the next body, from this life cycle to the next life cycle. That's what comes with us. That's why we really have to pay tremendous attention to virtue and non-virtue, because we will leave all the things behind, our memories, our name, our hair, our nails, our relatives, our possessions. We will leave all that. But what will stay with us, what will go into the next life, are these imprints, the karmic imprints, are virtue and non-virtue. That will go with our mind. If our minds have been purified and subdued through listening, pondering, and meditation, we may again acquire the ship of leisure and fortune. You remember from the previous verses, the very first verse. That means, the ship of leisure and fortune is the human birth in which we can practice Dharma, the human vessel. Or we may actually acquire higher births. We can be bodhisattvas or Buddhas, if we've ripened to that place. Or if we have accrued negative imprints, we might acquire an animal body or a body of a hungry ghost. That's why it's very important to think about what to do in this life at this moment in this body. Everything depends on our mental imprints. Mental imprints are the causes, and the karma are the conditions of our next body and specifically our next life. So our specific next body and our specific next life, whether we're going to be bodhisattvas or we're going to be animals. So please understand that all these places are states of consciousness, awareness. Whatever our mind is what our life is. That is the life that we will receive in our next cycle. The quality of our mind will determine our next life, just as it has determined this current life. What can truly help us in this life is the authentic understanding of emptiness, nature, of impermanence and interdependence. And if we can truly spend our time listening, pondering, and meditating that, we can definitely cut through meaningless distractions of ordinary pursuits. And that's the leisure and fortune ship of human existence. We can understand what's important and what's not important, and we can cultivate positive states of mind and have positive imprints, or negative states of mind, which send us to lower rebirths. Verse number 5, when evil companions are associated with the three poisons increase. You remember the three poisons, like the three channels: hatred, desire, and ignorance. Ignorance being the most important cause of all things. It's the underlying cause of all the poisons of samsara. The activities of listening, pondering, and meditation decline, and love and compassion are extinguished. Abandoning evil companions is the Bodhisattva's practice.
This is the next verse, yeah?
The next verse, number 5.
Number 5.
When evil companions are associated with. Bad company refers to two types of companions: teachers and ordinary people, ordinary companions, in whose associations are poisons and negativities arise and grow and increase, leaving those imprints on our mind. First and foremost, it refers to false teachers who will mislead us, and more importantly, will make us waste time straying away from the authentic path, which ultimately leads to enlightenment. First to bodhisattva activity, and then ultimately to Buddhahood enlightenment. So we have to stay away from those places and people where our negativities grow. That's what it means, abandoning evil companions. We have to abandon all those things and places which make our poisons grow. We have to know our faults and avoid them at all costs. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to know those who exert bad influence on us, those with whom we lose our love and compassion, because love and compassion are results of wisdom. So we need to be brutally honest and know, places and people we have to avoid, within which we cannot be loving and compassionate. In other words, who kind of, obscure our mind of love and compassion, our mind of wisdom. Because it is only those who traverse the path themselves, the Buddha Dharma path, that can actually point us to the right direction. That specifically pertains to teachers. Because those simply frolicking in this life looking for gain or importance will surely mislead us. We will not find our gurus on the New York Times bestseller list. We will most likely find a guru, in the midst of trying to help beings in distress, or in a retreat place or a monastery. That's where we will find our gurus. They're not going to be intellectuals, selling books and talk show hosts, giving us little advice on this and that. Most likely these places will be in very serious places and circumstances of either helping others or, places of study and meditation. Those people, they can point us in the right direction, put us on the path. Only a qualified teacher who is blessed with the authentic lineage himself can point out our true nature of the mind, our Buddhahood, and point us in the right direction and place us on the path, which will eventually bring us to that result. And also, all the ordinary people in our life in whose company our negativities flare up and cloud our awareness. So all these situations must be abandoned if we are truly trying to be on the path. It's like trying to, be sober. We know we have to not, have company with whom we go to the bars. It's trying to keep company that will intensify our virtuous endeavors and will subdue and eliminate eventually our negative and our negativities. Verse number 6. When sublime spiritual friends are relied upon, one's faults are exhausted and one's qualities increase like the waxing moon. Holding sublime spiritual friends, even more dear than one's own body, is the Bodhisattva's practice. Our nature, our mind, is often compared to a crystal mirror, therefore, a crystal or a mirror, therefore reflecting a specific surface. We ourselves become like the things that we are reflecting. Being near a Buddha or a Bodhisattva takes away the doubt and dissolves our negativities. Only authentic teachers can give us authentic guidance, and that guidance is more precious than life itself. Why is it more precious than life itself? Because we've had countless lives, absolutely countless. There's no mathematical number, well, infinity, but that's not really a number, that's a symbol. We've had countless lives that we've lived in mere pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain. These countless lives have been meaningless. So if we have a life at this time where we are pursuing Dharma and it's not being wasted, we of course have guides in those lives. We have our teachers. So holding them more precious as our body is, more important, is by far more important. We've had countless bodies and countless lives, which we've squandered and wasted. Verse number 7. What worldly gods themselves who are also bound in a prison of cyclic existence are able to protect others. Therefore, when refuge is sought, taking refuge in the undeceiving triple gem is the Bodhisattva's practice. This particular verse refers to mundane, ordinary teachers and ordinary gods, ordinary doctrinal things that we follow, self-helpy things, religious, dogmatic things, or if we are really truly on the path and we are practicing Dharma by being, by practicing the 6 paramitas, by practicing wisdom, and by practicing, the ethical conduct, guided by this wisdom. So in whom do we take refuge? Who can help us in this life? These doctrines, or the actual practice, the actual practice and being on the path. So
The triple gem, just explain what that is.
Triple gem is Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. We actually take refuge not in the guru or the Sangha. We take the refuge. We go to the guru for the refuge, but we take actual refuge in the Buddha Dharma, the teaching. The teaching, is what's going to eventually reveal our Buddha nature to us. That is the authentic path. The guru is the one who can guide us and help us to get there. The Sangha are our companions who go on the path together along with us. So this is the triple gem. So in verse number 7, what worldly gods? So who do we follow? What kind of knowledge do we follow? Do we follow this kind of samsaric, self-healthy, or orthodoxical kind of an approach? Or do we actually discard all this extraneous stuff, dive in and try to discover our authentic Buddha nature? Who can be our guide on this path? And the answer is very clear. Only the people or the beings who have traversed the path to Buddhahood themselves, like Buddha Shakyamuni, previous Buddhas, beings who've attained enlightenment, are teachers. Those who have cultivated wisdom and compassion as their life pursuit, they can give us definitive understanding of samsara and how to cross its perilous ocean, in which we and all other beings, all our mother sentient beings, have been drowning since beginningless time. The Buddha gave us the teaching. He also crossed that ocean of samsara. He is the guide who gave us the map. He gave us the teaching, right? And from this time on, teachers with authentic lineage have been giving it to us, the students, for all this time since this event, historical event. So these guides can help us find the jewel of authentic realization. Only these guides, not worldly guides, but these guides. They can help and guide us on the path across the ocean of samsara. So these 7 stanzas, from 1 through 7, they are called the preliminaries. And why are the preliminaries so important? In fact, many teachers always talk about the preliminaries being much more important. They call them the foundation. They're more important than the structure up top, because without a solid foundation, the structure up top will topple. It will definitely, will fall. It has no substance to stand on. Because it's through the preliminaries and through the preliminary practices that our mind is first mixed with authentic Dharma, with authentic understanding of reality outside of our habitual, ordinary dualistic thinking and labeling. If we have not internalized the preliminaries, moving on to more advanced practices is useless. People can practice for many years and have 0 results. In other words, their dualistic mind is still very, very strong. When they sit down to meditate, they're just like playing out various storylines. They have not subdued, the force of, of dualistic thinking, and they have also not subdued, the poisons. So when they go out into the world, they act just as before. Their anger flares up, their desire is very strong, and and all of that has to do with ignorance. So what have they not internalized? What is this preliminary stuff that we have to internalize? And Michael has hinted at that. We have to understand the relative and the absolute to truth as the union that really makes up our existence and existence of all things. So what is this? In the preliminaries, we first ponder and understand the impermanent nature of compounded phenomena. That includes ourselves, one portion of ourselves, the portion of ourselves that's not our true nature of our mind, but this dualistic mind, conceptual thinking, that self of us that we identify and we know as conceptual thinking, the dualistic mind, that we have to understand what that is. And we also have to, and also in preliminaries, we understand the suffering and the causes of suffering of samsara. In samsara, we experience constant physical and mental suffering. As soon as we overcome one suffering, the next one has already arisen. Why? Because in our ordinary mind of delusion, in which we mistake impermanent things for permanent, including this conceptual mind with which we identify, because we have not habituated ourselves to our nature of mind, this mind that has settled, understands, and can act compassionate. We take composite and impermanent things as real and substantially existent. We pursue them and we suffer. We want these composite things, composite impermanent things to last, to stay. We want to prolong the states of pleasure, and we want to keep the things that we think provide us this pleasure, but that's impossible. Impermanent things arise, they'll persist for a moment, and then they transform. The elemental properties break down, they become other things. This is all just in vain, trying to pursue these pleasures and stabilize them and keep on to them, like as if they're gonna remain. Because the reality of the relative condition is that it is permanently and ceaselessly in flux. Flux, impermanence is the definition of samsara. Things arise only to disperse and to cease. In terms of the relative reality, things and situations are like breaths, and we know why they can't stop. So please contemplate emptiness of phenomena and the emptiness of the self as we understand it through this, conceptual conglomerate, the 8 consciousnesses, and meditate on them. Understand the nature of suffering. So this wonderful quote that I'm going to read, in this is qualifying all the relative phenomena. Every phenomenon, everything is interdependent. There are no independent entities. To produce something like a car, for example, one cause is not enough, nor a single condition. Every wire, screw, and nail is necessary. If one thing is missing, the car won't run. So a car is not one independent thing, but a combination of many causes and conditions. Car is just a label we put on that impermanent conglomeration of parts. Every phenomenon is of that same nature. We ourselves are of that same nature in our conceptual identity. When we realize that nature, we are realizing the nature of emptiness. Emptiness is not a negation. It's not a mere nothingness. It is a label we put on the nature of interdependence, of cause and results. When we realize this nature, we will know the manner of manifestation of phenomena and how they function. We will know how to be free from suffering and delusion, because our grasping to these impermanent things will become less when we truly understand. So to truly understand, we have to really, really internalize it, right? I mean, we have to go, beyond the label that we understand, this label of emptiness. We truly have to start to feel it experientially. When we hold something that's precious and beautiful, enjoy that moment, but don't grasp to it. We just have to understand the impermanent nature of this pleasurable moment, so cherish it, but don't attach so strongly, see through it, love it and let it go. As this quote that I just read, emptiness of phenomena is a label. It's one way to understand relative arisings, That's how we, relative arisings, we classify them as emptiness because we know causes and conditions come, elements conglomerate together, and something arises for a moment and then it ceases, as in the quote, if there's one screw missing, the car will not start. So we know how fragile all these things are. And for sure, one screw will be loosened on the road. And, for sure, the car will expire. Just like this package of the body and conceptual mind will expire at the time of death.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're going to try to get some questions in. Thanks for your explanation on those next four stanzas. Let's see. And we'll continue this discussion, in the next class. We'll just keep going on with these 37 practices. I said it before, it's a heart teaching of our teacher Garchen Rinpoche. So he's made it clear that this is something that's very important. Thank you, Victoria, for your commentary today. We appreciate it very much. Hi, Michael and Victoria. My work involves a lot of close contact with people in pain, both physically and emotionally. I'm having a hard time separating myself from the weight of their suffering, and I find myself carrying it home with me, and it affects me emotionally, especially in the evening. I'm seeking some direction or resources on how to process this. Maybe you have some thoughts.
Well, it just, relates very much to this relative, when circumstances arise, our body, our mind, bodies and minds of others, remember that they will disperse, they will transform, keep the nature, the empty nature in mind. And most importantly, keep the other aspect of what we call empty, the nature of mind, non-objectified consciousness that pervades everything like space. Remember that consciousness is also what we refer to as Buddha nature. Remember you and those in difficulties. The difficulties will end or transform into other difficulties or liberation, but no matter what, remember the impermanent nature and remember the Buddha nature. Remember the nature of your Buddhahood and their Buddhahood, that always gives me a lot of strength.
And you can also, in some ways, what you're doing in essence is a form of Tonglen, right? Because you're working with their suffering and you're taking some of it literally within you and you're taking some of it home. So, I don't know if you've been in this class when we spoke about Tonglen, but it's almost like you're breathing in that pain and suffering and negativities into the space in your heart. And it's almost like a blackness that immediately transforms into crystal clarity because you're applying your mind, wisdom mind or mind of emptiness and things. And then you can breathe that clarity back out into them. That may help you as an exercise. And ultimately in the end, exactly what Victoria's saying is that your conceptual mind is carrying it with you, really. Your conceptual mind of how you're perceiving their pain and their suffering, but just know that you're in reality you're helping heal that. You're helping them work with that, work through that.
Yes, and just to put the two things together, the wisdom is this view of what I just explained, the relative and the ultimate. The relative conditions of suffering, the samsaric nature of things, and the Buddha nature. That's the view. But the method is what Michael just reminded us of, doing Tonglen. That is the method. So use the view and apply the method. Must always use them together. We do have methods of, doing things.
This question is a little bit along the same track. What do you do when a friend says something hurtful to you? I want to breathe out kindness and understanding, but I just can't stop focusing on how angry and hurt I feel. Tonglen does help a little. Who do I forgive first, my anger or their actions?
It's not so much about the forgiveness. Forgiveness is a natural consequence if you can look at that anger and you can understand its nature. Most importantly, remember, your anger is a habitual response. So, the more dense this kind of conceptual self is, the more stronger, the more solid the target will be. The less, uh, the less physical and dense is that sense of the self, the less you will be hurt. You eventually will be able to hear hurtful things like empty sound. Remember not to judge poisons or the arising of poisons and the results in yourself and in your friend. That's where forgiveness comes in. Forgiveness is the same as understanding the nature of poisons arising.
I'm in therapy but want the Buddhist perspective. I suffer from severe agoraphobia, and it makes going out very difficult. I happen to be trying to go out after class. Any advice? Agoraphobia, I believe, is fear of crowds or open spaces or outdoors or things like that. When people get afraid to leave the house or leave kind of a closed environment they consider protective. Obviously, if you're dealing with this as a real, as a phobia and something that's really like a mental issue, professional help is always a good first line of attack when something like this, something clinical this way, be it, psychiatry, psychology, therapy, that kind of thing. In terms of a Buddhist perspective, Victoria, you have anything to comment on that?
I would meditate on trying to understand why you've created an environment that is safe here, but cannot transpose that safety and beauty onto the environment there. Why is there such a particular divide? What really, you have to be honest with what's very frightening, really. But like I said, using the view to understand, the inner and the outer, they're really not separate. So adjusting your inner will definitely transform your outer circumstance.
I am American, live in France for 4 years. Yet even in my daily practice, I find I still hold on to my old American lifestyle, or I romanticize a life I no longer have, and spend a lot of useless time comparing it to where I am now. It's very easy to we have very selective memories as people, and we can look at the past. We do a lot of editing and filtering, often, romanticizing the good, the good times. A lot of people do that who are in recovery, who have gone through, had addictions and recovered from them, and they look back and say, "Oh, but we had this good time and that," and they completely forget, the day they fell down the stairs because they were too drunk or they were hungover and, weren't able to function the next day at work and felt anxiety and regret and all those things. So I think meditation and Buddha Dharma can really help you, just by staying in the moment. I mean, if you can't move back, if that's something you really feel you'd be happier, where you belong, and you're required to stay where you are, Buddhist practice, meditation is about being in the moment, which is really the only reality, because the past doesn't exist. It's gone, and the future doesn't exist. So the moment is the only thing we have. And ultimately, as Garchen Rinpoche says, the only cause of happiness is love, is being a benefit to other beings, So perhaps you can find more ways of bringing that into your life. Because it most likely was not the place that made you happy. It was your engagement in whatever you were doing at the time that made you happy. And if it was indeed true happiness, it probably meant being a benefit to other beings or people or animals or whatever in some way. So Do I continue to the same person? Do I continue to meditate and ask to let this go? I think continue to meditate. Sure. I don't think you should ever stop meditating. I think we got to keep doing that. I think we're in it for the long haul, as they say. And with that, let's dedicate the merit of today's class for the benefit of all beings. And again, when we say this, as we say the four measurables, we're talking about all beings not apart from us. Now, we're not, separate. We're talking from the center of that ultimate non-dual, interdependent soup of truth and reality. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you, Victoria, for your generosity and your commentary and teaching today. Thank you, Nick Solidio, for your kindness and generosity. We'll see you next week, hopefully.